I'm Stephen Foskett.
I'm Frederic Van Haren.
And this is the Utilizing AI podcast. Welcome to another episode of Utilizing AI, the podcast about enterprise applications for machine learning, deep learning, data science, and other artificial intelligence topics. Frederic, one of the things that we've talked about quite a lot is that the building artificial intelligence and machine learning applications and putting them into production, well, it's not really about the technology, is it?
No, it's not. It's creating end-to-end applications and pipelines is very challenging. The tool chain to go from training, building models all the way to production is not easy, and that's why I think it's really interesting to talk this week to Orly about what can Converge.io do as far as tools are concerned in order to help building those pipelines in a consistent and repeatedly method.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've got lots and lots of tools. The challenge is bringing them together. So let's meet our guest today. As you mentioned, Orly Amsalem from Converge.io. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I actually started quite some time ago as a software developer. I kind of experienced every type of software development there is, but mostly I work with large information systems. Pretty soon I switched and started to I worked with BI applications in large organizations like banking, hospitals, healthcare, and so on BI applications like massive databases, getting data from multiple sources, and so on. And for me, the natural next step would be machine learning and data science, because once you have all this data in place, you have to do something with it. And then I think it was like about 15 years ago or so, I started to look into data science. I started to learn more about it and started to think, what can I actually do? And back then, we didn't had a lot of deep learning. It was very classic machine learning, more like classic data science algorithms like random forest and stuff, and it wasn't enough. When you have like masses of data, you need also always to evolve. So from there I moved. I worked at a startup company, and I was leading a team of data scientists and data engineers, and moved also to manage the product side and the business side of products that are actually based on machine learning and data science. And from there, the way for Converge was kind of natural after working in big organization, in enterprises, banking, hospitals, and also big companies like Fortune 500 companies, media companies. I switched to a smaller company, which is doing like cutting edge technology to solve all the problems that in those big organizations we usually used to face.
Yeah, the slogan on the website, I mean, you go to converge.io and you find the slogan is everything you need to build AI, which is kind of an expansive slogan. But what do you mean by that? I mean, what exactly are you offering that is, everything to build AI?
Yeah, so usually a typical day for a data scientist would be, okay, first they need the data. So how do I connect to those data sources? I need to build maybe APIs to certain databases, to certain data sources, and so on. It's also about managing your experiments, right? A data scientist, it's a research work. It's not something that you know how to start and how to end. So how you manage all this research. In terms that you have your data, you might try different things with this data, with maybe parts of this data. So you need something that helps you to manage all this data, the versions of the data, each one of those experiments. Some easy tools and frameworks to manage all the experiments. Let's say that you have a machine learning model and you actually want to run it multiple times with different parameters for each time. So what, you need to write the code to create those fancy framework yourself? No, so actually at Converge, this is what we do for you. Also, it's about managing the resources. Let's not forget that training a model could take lots of resources on the training phase. It could be that you will need to utilize a GPU or multiple resources. Your data may reside on premise, but your resources in the cloud, and it could be that you have a very complex and hybrid environment. So at Converge, we also manage all this for you so you can have like a smooth experience, bringing all the things that you need. And of course, the last and very, very important and very challenging piece of this puzzle is the deployment, which means to take this model that you created in your research, in your development environment, and putting in your production environment. And this is very challenging to many companies. And at Converge, we provide a very smooth way to also take your model from your research environment and deploy it easily on any infrastructure that you have. So eventually this model will be accessed and utilized and will provide the value it was intended to provide.
Yeah, I was listening to your intro and it's very similar to what I experienced. And what I am and others probably are very interested in is how do you go from being a developer into like an AI/ML market. I mean, as you described, you know, the hidden Markov theory and all that good stuff. I mean, then in the early days, as I think you called it, the classic AI was a lot challenging. You had to come up with a lot of things yourself. What were the challenges you think to go from development to AI? And then maybe like a follow-up question is for people that are thinking about AI and are doing more classical development, what are the challenges they would probably see and what do you think they should do in order to get into the AI market?
Yeah, so I really love this question because it's really it's like about telling my story. So I think that the main challenge is the change in mindset, because as a developer, you know what you are about to accomplish, and you definitely know that you can accomplish it. You know that to take you from A to B, you need to take certain steps and you'll get the results that you want. Usually you also work with software analysts and product managers, and you have like a framework on what your product or whatever the software that you're developing should look like and should behave and should function. But when it comes to AI, you don't really have this. It's something that you need to come up with yourself. You need to research, you need to try an error, right? Until you get to the right thing. And it's also about being an expert in a certain domain. So let's say, I remember that one of the times that I was experimenting with some models, so I didn't really know what would be a good set of features to solve the problem, but I was not a domain expert. So you need to go to find, I don't know, economists or doctors or whoever is the domain expert to help you, but then you need to make it accessible to explain what exactly you're doing. And back then, I think it was, if I remember, when I'm thinking about this time, then it was more accepted or more there wasn't a lot going on with machine learning, right? So it need to be very explanatory. If you couldn't explain your model and what it is doing, so it would not be accepted well. So how do I know this model works? This was a question that I would hear very often. Today, I think many business people who maybe don't know exactly how those models are trained, they trust it because they see that everything is working with AI. You see the results speaking for themselves. You have like in every simple application, you already have an AI, but when you just start with it, then this is, I think, the main challenge, like how your customers are going to accept it, and also the change in mindset that you need to go through from something very certain to do something very uncertain.
I think that's so insightful. And I think that one of the things I've heard from the smartest people, some of the smartest people I've ever met, is when they talk about the things they don't know, not the things they do know. I think some of the non-smarter people tend to talk about the things they do know instead. And it's so true that when it comes especially to machine learning and AI applications, a lot of the people that are out there trying to do this, a lot of people that are listening to this podcast, certainly, because that's sort of the world we live in, are faced by this challenge, and they understand that they don't know what they need to do. They don't know what they need next. And I think that they're seeing a lot of discussion of sort of deep details of machine learning, when in reality, what they need is maybe something a little bit more simple. So how do companies or individuals like yourselves then, what's the practical way that they get from here to there in terms of getting into the world of AI applications?
So actually, this is the question that we asked ourselves a couple of, not so long ago, like a couple of months ago, because Converge, the machine learning operation platform, is very oriented towards data scientists, experienced, educated, that they know to train fancy models and so on. But then we said, okay, even myself, I'm not this fancy data scientist, right? I came from a development background. I did some machine learning, and we thought how we are going to take, these models that are not going to be, it's not about, also building those fancy models. It's just about using them, right? So how do we take this and make AI accessible for everyone? And we put an emphasis on software developers because this is the audience that we feel very connected to. This is our community. This is us. Like Converge, we started, the company started as development efforts of data science, of course, but we are very, very connected to software developers. So we took this question and we thought a lot, and we came up with, I think, one of the most amazing solutions that I've seen recently in terms of machine learning. I'm not just saying because it's Converge, because it's really very intuitive to developers. And we created a solution that we call blueprints, which are pipelines that are ready to use, that were built by data scientists for the use of everyone, with an emphasis of software developers. Because we understand that now software developers also need to use AI as part of their day-to-day work. It needs to be something that they have in their toolbox. And I'm not expecting them now to, take classes and educate themselves and become, data scientists. They are excellent in what they are doing. They are professionals in software development. They are creating applications, but they need to enhance those applications with machine learning. So I think that, and it also relates to your question, Frederic, what should they do? So I think that software developers don't need to be afraid of utilizing and using machine learning in their applications, but they need to find the right solutions that will work smoothly with what they have. They need to be very careful, I think, not to, defocus from what they're doing. You are a software developer, you're excellent at creating applications, and this should be your main focus. If you need to add some AI because you need to solve the problem, I don't know, if you're developing an insurance application and you need some OCR capabilities because you want to, I don't know, scan some manual claims and translate them into something the machine can understand and respond to, or you need a virtual agent that is trained on your data. You don't need to go and learn and study from scratch how to do it. Search for those ready solutions, but you need to find those solutions that will work smoothly with your environment. Sometimes you go to, a cloud vendor that provides you, but it requires you to shift everything to this cloud. But I don't know, you might have some privacy issues that prevents you from doing this, or you might be in an organization that choose a different platform. So you need something very flexible, something that will take care of the entire pipeline from, the connectivity to the data that you have, through the training and deployment until you can actually interact with something. And I think that also developers need to put a big emphasis on how to interact with those models in a very easy way. API, just plug it in your code and start working with it.
Yeah, I think AI is definitely all about learning and trying and trial and error, so to speak. And I like the concept of blueprint, right? It's like you said, it's a great bootstrap for people to get going. Now, is the blueprints, is that something that you would provide, or is that something that the community provides, or is that a combination between the community and yourself?
So we actually started some blueprints by ourselves because we wanted to contribute to the community, but we definitely welcome and invite and want that it will become a community thing. This is something that we give for the community, and we hope that the community will start working with it, and they will create their own blueprints, and each one will contribute, and then we'll have a beautiful marketplace of many use cases in different domains, different industries.
So AI is all about data. Does Blueprint also come with data, or is it is there an abstraction layer between the code and the data?
Yeah, so actually, because we wanted to simplify this process, and we had a conference the earlier week, but we had the AMLCon, but we had one 2021, and we run a survey. And one of the and we asked, what are the challenges that you have in machine learning phases? So of course, data was the first thing, right? Number one, because people are still struggling with data. So we also took this and we built with, so we understand that those blueprints need to provide also a solution for, the data problem. So one of the things that we created is the connectors to different data sources. So you can connect to your Salesforce or your Marketo system, or, even just to Twitter or other social media or Wikipedia, whatever source that you want. So we have some pre-built connectors, and all you need to provide is your account at Twitter, or keywords that we can send to Wikipedia and get the information and so on. So we really try to make it very simple. You don't even need to struggle or think, how am I going to pull the data from my organizational Salesforce? You just have the connector, you just put the data that you want to retrieve, and then you get it. So those blueprints definitely come. This is from the data to the model to the deployment, it's all stitched as a one pipeline. And of course, it provides all the flexibility that if you want, it depends on your skill level, if you want to change stuff, if you want to, retrain models. So we open it up to any type of change, any type of combination. You want to replace the Marketo with something else, go ahead, it's yours, it's the community's.
Yeah, when we talk about AI, we have training and inference or production, if you wish, and there are many challenges with that, because the approaches and the methodologies between the two can be very different. I feel like the market now has a much better understanding of training, and that the tools around training are maturing much faster than for production, and that production today is still the number one challenge in the pipeline. Would you agree with that?
I would more than agree, because I can back it up with numbers. So this is the second question that we asked on the survey, and we had like hundreds of participants, data scientists and developers cross industry, any industry you can think of. So after getting the data and struggling with the data, let's put that aside. So training, only 10% said that training is their challenge. It's not a challenge anymore. I totally agree. But the number one challenge after, struggling and handling the data was the deployment. How do I take my model and make it accessible and usable?
Yeah, and it's also repeatable, right? I think one of the challenges nowadays is that it's not just creating a model and deploying it. There's a lot of demand for data lineage, right? Where did the data come from? Can you prove the data came from the different sources you used? And additionally, it's also required about ethical background, what data did you use, and how can we figure out which data should or shouldn't be used in the model, right? I think from a production standpoint, there's many challenges, and I'm not even sure the challenges are always technical. Sometimes they can also come from a different angle, meaning that enterprises don't have a great direction or what they want to do production wise. Yeah. Is that something you see as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I can also back it up with numbers, because we see, we looked at, the companies that are running massive scale experiments, right? I'm talking about hundreds or thousands of experiments per month. And 57% of those companies that are running massive scale said that they deploy less than 1/5 of what they are creating in their development environment in production, because they don't really know how it will work and how it will play. And it's not necessarily something that they find useful. And also something that I think that is also related to this, we ask if they have like some kind of a framework to manage those models in terms of their life cycle, because the model, can drift and can change because the data is changing. So what do you do about that? You need something to alert and tell you that something has changed with the model. And most of the companies are not working with these kind of tools. So this together, I think, creates this, I think, gap between what you plan to do, what you have in mind, what you have in your development or research, and what you can actually implement. And so I think, utilizing an MLOps platform is something that it's not an option anymore. I think it's a mandatory thing because it just, takes half of, at least, like high percentages of all the work that you do around in terms of, managing your resources and allocating your resources. We had customers that they had like this Excel file saying they had like very expensive GPU, says, okay, in this hour, this team can utilize the GPU, and at this time they can utilize, and they would, fight over what time they can utilize this. And, with using an MLOps platforms like Converge is something that, you just submit your job and the system manages the resources for you. And if something crashed, then we know exactly where to run it again from. And if you want to use pod instances to save your costs, so that's also optional because we know how to move them between those pod instances and so on. So you need something to take off the load of all the complexity of managing everything from the data scientists to something which is more automatic.
I know that some of the people listening were probably like, oh man, I wish we had an Excel spreadsheet. We don't even have that. We just yell at each other. Yeah. Or actually probably the number one way of dealing with contention for hardware resources is mine. Nobody else can have it, which is also very common.
Yeah, but when you have like the most expensive GPUs, something, you can't keep it to yourselves. It's like so expensive hardware that you have to use it to the end to get to 100% utilization of the hardware. Otherwise, why to invest in it?
Yeah, and I think that that's the situation that a lot of companies are in, and especially when it comes to production ML applications, they're looking at this as, well, basically the sandbox and picnic table days are done. We're going into production. We're going to offer this as a part of our enterprise IT portfolio. We're going to have, as you mentioned, AI is indispensable in modern applications. It's being integrated more and more everywhere. Everywhere you look, there's different AI use cases. And I think that overall, what we're seeing is sort of the normalization of MLOps in all enterprise IT settings. So given that, Orly, you're probably seeing this ahead of many people because you deal with a lot of different companies. And of course, you're deeply involved in the MLOps pipeline. What are the main bottlenecks that are happening right now in MLOps? What's holding people back, and how can we, I guess, grease the skids and help to move MLOps forward into this new world of being just part of IT?
Mm-hmm. So I think the first blocker would be management buy-in. Managers and leaders, sometimes they're getting also the let's be more AI, let's be an AI first organization, but they don't really understand what it means in terms of, equipping their developers with the right tools and the right budgets. So they say, okay, let's hire some data scientists and some help from our developers. They can be, machine learning developers or machine learning engineers, and let's get going. Sometimes they would even think that, why do we need to invest in an MLOps platform? Let's buy it in-house. Let's tailor it according to what we need. And they don't understand that, it's such a lot of effort. It's not something that you build, it's evolving all the time. It is changing. You always need to add something to it. So I think it should come from from above, leaders, they need to understand that if you want to really transparent in your organization to be AI first, give the right budgets, help your teams to learn more about those tools, be more committed to providing them those tools, and sometimes we had this case that you get a budget for the entire team, so you invest in your infrastructure and you invest in your storage and everything, but then the team is coming and saying, okay, now we also need an MLOps platform, and say, why do we are paying to this cloud vendor, and we are paying to this GPU vendor, and we are paying, why do we need something else? But if you want to orchestrate all of this and you want to give the flexibility of hybrid environment to utilize your on-prem, your cloud, your everything all together, then you have to understand that this is something that you need your teams to use. Something else that we noticed also is knowledge. Not even, sometimes even, data scientists, they're not very familiar in these with these applications, and they don't really know what exactly to expect. They have their code, they have their Python, they have their notebooks, the frameworks that they are using. They know to write some scripts to, to turn off and turn down the jobs that they're submitting to their, clusters or to their infrastructure, but they don't understand how much time they're spending on doing this. So I think both, leadership backup and, buy-in, and also some knowledge that is missing, and it's some kind of, we need to do some market education around. This is not a luxury. This is something that you really need.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, there are a couple of facets, right? There's the ecosystem of storage, compute, and network. It's not because you buy the fastest GPU by itself that it will give you results on its own. And the second one is more people, right? So you have the C executives, you have the data scientists, the data engineers, and then the whole IT, DevOps, MLOps crew, and all of this needs to work together. One of the things I've always seen in the market is that when they come together, they look at the solution as being static, meaning they buy an environment and then they hope they don't have to touch it for the next 3 years, which we all laugh about it, considering we understand that AI, even 3 hours is a challenge to keep it all static. But I do think that there's still a lot of messaging that needs to happen, but it also comes to the fact that the tools now are commodity, right? It's you don't have to build them yourselves. You have access to a decent amount of tools, which is good and bad, right? If people know what they're doing and they have a right ecosystem, it's a bootstrap. If they don't know what they're doing, then it's more of them creating bad output and very difficult to undo that.
Yeah, totally agree. You just reminded me of large company that I have some ex-colleagues and friends there, and they're one of the largest companies that are providing recommendations. I'm pretty sure that everyone got their recommendations from them one time, I was talking with them. It was like some light talk about MLOps and everything, and they said, no, we have such a specific and unique use cases, so we want to tailor it to our use case. And I said, and they were struggling for, I don't know, like a long time. I would say even more than a year, definitely, just in thinking what exactly would they need in such an environment, and how to tailor it directly to whatever they specifically need. But along this time, they're wasting a lot of time. They have those data scientists that cannot work for full efficiency. And you can just solve it with getting one of those decent tools. There are very good tools out there that you can use and solve so many problems.
So overall, I suppose the question then becomes, how can people build a successful ML program? If you were to talk to the folks in our audience and say, I see where you are, this is what you need to do next. Let's just give us a summary. What should we do? What should we be doing to build a successful ML program?
Mm-hmm. So I think first that you need to understand that, AI is a team sport. It's not something that, just data scientists are doing or just developers or just devs. It's something that you do together. If you want it to scale and you want it to be sustainable, then you need to have your entire team around it. In the sense that, you have infrastructure, so, and things are running on this infrastructure, so you want your DevOps to have easy access to understand what's going on, be able to monitor the system health, model health, and so on. It's also about, the domain experts and those who are the key to get the data sources. Those are also part of the process. It's also about those ML engineers that can bring the data, build those data pipelines, and also, of course, about the data scientists and the models. So need to have like very strong communication, have a tool that everyone can collaborate on the same tool. It can't be fragmented. Each group will have their own tool and they will never meet. By the way, this was one of the challenges that blocked the smooth transition of a model from development to deployment, because every team was using a different set of tools, different set of automation, and when they tried to connect together, they couldn't. So one platform that will serve as a hub for all those stakeholders, which are very important in the process, I think this is like the baseline. The next step, I would say, is to be more, I think, open-minded in the sense that, there are certain things that your data scientists need to do, if it's like training those big models and so on. But then you have, once those models are trained, you have your software developers use them, as a way to scale your machine learning efforts. It's very hard now these days to get, a data scientist. There is a shortage in data scientists. It's a long education path, and every company now wants to have a big team of data scientists, but you also have your developers, and they can utilize machine learning for whatever application they are doing. So don't be afraid to transform, other functions in your business to create and help in the machine learning efforts. And of course, I think that we see today also in terms of infrastructure, we see that most companies are not using one infrastructure, each one from their own reasons. Sometimes it's about budgets, it's about privacy issues, it's about many things. So you need something to be able to manage, a tool to manage all this complex environment. And I think eventually it comes down to a good MLOps platform that will help you to scale, to manage your hybrid resources, and also will support every, type of user that eventually will be the creator of machine learning.
Well, thank you for that. I think that that's a great summary and a great place to leave this conversation of the challenges of building ML programs. So now's the time to shift gears in our podcast. We are going to ask our guest 3 questions that they are unprepared for. It's kind of a fun off-the-cuff opportunity to express some opinions about AI that might not have come up during the podcast. So Frederic, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Sure. So my question is, when do you think AI will diagnose a patient as accurately as a human doctor?
That's a tough question. I think it's not too long. I think for certain, and I'm not an expert in healthcare, right? But I think in certain diseases, I think there are already some solutions in terms of skin cancer or MRI images that are being diagnosed, and they're getting better and better. I think because it's such a sensitive thing, our health, everybody's health, then I think we'll always want to have someone which we trust, even in terms of, emotionally trusting. We'll take a look and interpret that's for us, and not just trust, a cold machine. That's what I think.
All right, my turn. We talked quite a lot about MLOps, and my question is quite simply, do you think that MLOps is a lasting and continuing trend, or is this just another step on the way for ML and DevOps concepts to be just normal parts of IT?
I think eventually it will be a normal part of IT. This is something that, like today, we have, DevOps processes, and you can't even imagine how you develop your code and deploy it without, DevOps tools and DevOps team. That will be the same thing for machine learning.
Well, thanks for that. And now we're going to bring in a question from a previous podcast guest. Our question comes from someone I think you know, Eitan Medina, Chief Operating Officer at Habana Labs, an Intel company. Eitan, take it away.
Hi, I'm Eitan Medina, Chief Operating Officer at Habana Labs, an Intel company. And my question to you is, if you could choose something that AI would do for you in your day-to-day tomorrow, what would that thing be?
Wow, that's a good question. So as a mom, my natural instinct would be to say, just, get this mess done, and, children, COVID, schools and everything. But I think that, we all want to have like better healthcare, just, stay healthy, stay positive. And if this is something that machine learning can help us, identify when people are less in this situation, then for me, that would be something great.
Well, thanks so much for that. I think that's a hopeful answer for a lot of people these days.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us for the conversation today. We really enjoyed it. We look forward to hearing what your question might be for a future podcast guest. And if our listeners want to join in, you can just send an email to host@utilizing-ai.com and we'll record your question. So, Orly, where can people connect with you and follow your thoughts? Or is there something recently that you'd like to point out that you've done?
So I just published a short article or a blog on data NAMI. It's 5 ways to shift to AI first. A couple of steps, some of them we discussed here, which can help you how to transform your organization to be AI first.
Excellent. Frederic, what's new with you?
Yeah, so I'm providing services around data management and designing and deploying large-scale AI clusters for customers. And you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter as Frederic V. Haren.
And as for me, you can find me at Foskett on most social media networks. I'm pretty excited that we are planning our next AI Field Day event. Just go to techfieldday.com to learn a little more about that. And we'd love to see people join us as presenters or perhaps as delegates or just tune in live. That's going to be May 18th through 20th. So thank you very much for listening to the Utilizing AI podcast. If you enjoyed this discussion, please do subscribe. We're available in pretty much every podcast platform. And while you're there, give us a rating or review, since that does help. Also, please do share it with your friends. This podcast is brought to you by gestaltit.com, your home for IT coverage from across the enterprise. For show notes and more episodes, go to utilizing-ai.com or follow us on Twitter at utilizing_AI. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.